and I feel very protective of them on the films that I work on with them.
What was that great story? I don't know if Paul remembers, but early in Meryl Streep's career, she went to an audition.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think it was Sophie's Choice. No, something else.
It was to be in King Kong.
Oh, that's right.
Italian director in Italian.
And she knew
said
Italian.
To his son who had brought her in and said, "Why'd you bring me this ugly woman?" And she
knew Italian.
She answered him in Italian.
I love that story. That's
Dino De Laurentiis.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
And, I would love it if you don't mind. When we met you at Michael Darner's house, if you would share that story about when we asked about working with Renee Zellweger. I love the story about the assistant and what she did.
Renee Zellweger is the kindest person I have ever worked with in my life. We did this movie, and then a couple of years later, we did a movie where completely different. She played a Depression, New Jersey housewife, struggling to keep on with Russell Crowe as her husband, a boxer.
Cinderella Man.
Cinderella
That's
Man.
right. Oh, I love that.
And she's the heart of that movie. And she had an assistant who had been with her for a few years, 5 years, I don't really know. And she was leaving Renee to go back to college because she had never finished college. And Renee's present to her was she paid for her college. And she didn't even want her to know, but she was like trying to get financial aid and trying to get scholarships. And finally Renee had to tell her, "I already paid for it, stop." And she went to like register, and the register said, "Oh my God, Renee Zellweger came in here and wrote this check."
I love that story. That's so cool.
Yeah, she is the greatest. She had to approve, she and her manager had to approve me to do this film. And I had done these sketches, and she came in and looked at them and said, "Let's go for it." So, yeah, the most lovely person. Matter of fact, somebody just told me a story that she she did that mini series What If,
Yes.
where she played this, and she was in a scene, and it was a big party scene, and she was standing there with the extras, and she looked at this extra and said, "Oh, what a pretty dress you have on." And the extra said to her, "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever had on my body." And Renee went over to the wardrobe person and said, "Please give her that dress, I'll just pay for it."
Wow.
Amazing.
She's the most giving person I've ever worked with, and I would do anything for her. And it's so exciting that she is in Judy.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
She is phenomenal. As the New Yorker said, transcendent performance.
Well, some of you may know she was the first person announced to receive a Best Actress Award for the Palm Springs International Film
Yeah, I'm
Festival
excited
here.
for her.
So that's great. That's bodes well for Golden Globe, SAG, and the Oscars. So
I
keep
don't
our
think
fingers
she
crossed.
I think she cares about the work.
Well, it shows on screen, that's for sure. Does anybody have any questions for Daniel?
I have a question.
Yes, Jason?
So this is obviously an homage to all the Doris Day Rock Hudson films. So did you, I'm assuming you immerse yourself in that era, whether it be that or the ones she did with James Garner and everything. Did you copy some of the clothes, or did you create them from the film, or were they original clothes or things that people had worn, or how did you go about that?
Well, I knew all those movies by heart before I started, and it was funny. I had done this very small movie in Canada, and the line producer of this movie, she was talking about this movie, and I was like, "Well, I'm the perfect person to do this movie. I know all of those movies by heart." She's like, "Really?" And we became quite good friends on location, and she brought me in, and I sort of had done, she handed me the script and way before, and I went in so prepared that by the end of the interview, it's like, yeah, I got this job. And I didn't really have the credits that other designers had, and I owe it all to my friend Patty Cullen, who got me this job. I worship these movies. The first and I worshipped even all of the fake versions that weren't with Doris Day. There's this movie called The Art of Love,
Yeah.
which as a kid I thought was about the best movie I'd ever seen in my life. It's really not that good if you watch it as an adult. But the first costume designer I ever knew the name of was this designer named Ray Aguian, who I went on to work with his partner, Bob Mackie. And that movie, it's all about the art direction. And I was like, oh, and when I started working for him, I said, oh, and you were in Paris? He goes, no, we weren't. We're on the Universal backlot. And that's what this movie is, an homage to that kind of, but The Art of Love has this scene where, and I remember it as a kid, I think I was 8, and it's just Angie Dickinson on the telephone, answering the phone, and it starts on her feet, and it goes up her bell-bottomed, fully beaded, backless pants jumpsuit. And that's it. And she talks on the phone, and that's over. And it's like they made that whole dress for her to talk on the telephone. And I thought, that's the best. So.
Anybody else? George, yes.
From Golden Age Hollywood, who are some favorite costume designers of yours?
Good question.
Wow. So many. Of course, Walter Plunkett was sort of the first designer who really made things authentically period and beautiful. And Piero Tossi, the Italian costume designer who designed those amazing movies, The Leopard, and then he designed, the most hilarious costumes in La Cage aux Folles in the 70s. So he, of course, Edith Head was the business of costumes, and she employed, I worked for Bob Mackie when I first moved to Los Angeles, and I met Vicki. And he was one of her sketch artists on a film, and he said, oh, I loved working for her because she'd come in and say, sketch black cocktail dresses. And that was and he would just sit there for 2 days and sketch black cocktail dresses, and she'd pick the one she liked. And, take his pen and sign them and move on. Wow. So there are so many costumes. I got to work with Milena Canonero, who is still designing movies and, amazing. Yeah, she first hired me to be on a film with her because I was about the same size as Robert Downey Jr. And I could try on clothes. And she would look at them before the fitting. So
Milena won Oscars for, Chariots
of Fire.
Nominated for Out of Africa, which was one of my favorite costume
She won
movies.
4. And matter of fact, she beat my boss, Bob Mackie, twice. She won for Chariots of Fire. He lost for Pennies from Heaven, the first Hollywood movie I ever worked on. She won for Barry Lyndon. She recently won for Grand Budapest Hotel, and also for Marie Antoinette. And been nominated 11 other times, or I have no idea.
One thing I want to mention is a film history sidebar. Speaking of the golden age of cinemas, I don't know how many of you know this or not, but for whatever reason, the Motion Picture Academy didn't introduce the Oscar for costume design until 1948, which was actually 20 years after the first Oscar. So they recognized the contributions of art direction and production design within the first 2 or 3 years. But for costume design, it took 20 years. And in doing so, Walter Plunkett's costumes for Gone with the Wind that were amazing, Wizard of Oz, Casablanca, all the movies that we all know as AFI's top 100 movies of all time, all those fabulously designed movies were out of luck because there was no Oscar for costume design, which I think is really kind of sad it took that many years. But then for makeup, it took all the way till 1980 for the Academy to add the category of best makeup. So.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think people work in our business not for awards, for doing beautiful work or good work and working on films that are interesting. And I know like the BAFTAs, they only will consider a movie, even if you have fabulous costumes in a bad movie, they will not accept that.
Oh.
Yeah, it has to be a quality picture, and I think that's great.